Gen Z may actually have it worse off financially than millennials. Millennials who graduated into a terrible economy with sluggish employment. Well, it turns out inflation plus sluggish employment may be the worst of all worlds. So let's put this up there on the screen. We have here the article, but let's actually go to the next part with the charts, because this really demonstrates to everybody. So here we have Gen Z inflation adjusted change for 16 to 24-year-olds who are spending 140% more on vehicle insurance, 110% more on housing, with a real wage increase of just 25 to 30%. So barely keeping up with the level of food inflation, with housing and with car insurance dramatically outpacing it by almost fivefold. If you go to the next part, you can actually see this as well. The average credit card balance has increased the most for people who are Gen Z, 42.9%, right up there with our fellow millennials at 42.5%, 29% for Gen X, just 14% for boomers, and 7% for the silent generation. Next part, please, as well. You can see here being hit hard the worst by inflation. The way that they calculate that is just about the level of price increase over the course of your working life. So obviously you can see there for millennials and for Gen Z, but there's also a lot of goods and services that people need to spend on necessities whenever they're younger. That's going to take up a bigger portion of their income. And that gets us to the last chart, if we can put that, please. The outsized share on necessities, where you can see that compared to all ages, rent is 20% of a Gen Z overall spending, just 6%, 8% for all ages. So almost 3 times more over there for rent. Dining out is roughly similar, car insurance roughly similar, but gas is higher. The rent equation and housing just shows us again how much worse it is for the younger that you are. You're not in a house, which means you are subject to the worst single part of inflation with housing, with rent, and your inability also to save to buy that house. So it all comes back to housing, as they say, and as we continue to say here on the show.
It really is astonishing when you think about it. When you think about, millennials were basically like in college or graduating into this massive economic crisis where the bottom just completely fell out. And that impacted millennials' employment. It impacted their earning prospects. Really, that lingers actually throughout an entire career.
Oh, for sure.
And so even though you had this massive economic crash, just the fact of how much housing, food, car insurance, health insurance, how much those costs have gone up has actually made it so that even without this, singular financial crash type event, Gen Z is doing worse than millennials at the same point in their lives. It really is quite eye-opening. It truly is. And just to go over a couple of the numbers again, Gen Z workers, they're more likely to go to college, they're more likely to have jobs, and they make more money, right, in nominal terms, not inflation adjusted, in nominal terms, than millennials did. So you look at that and say, okay, well, they should be doing pretty good, right? Wrong, because they're paying 31% more for housing than millennials did when they graduated college after adjusting for inflation. Car insurance by people 16 to 24 more than doubled over that time period. Health insurance spending, 46% increase from when millennials were coming out of college and having to figure out health insurance. So when you add all of those things up and then you look at tepid wage growth that does not even come close to comparing, it is quite astonishing. And it also obviously dovetails with our politics. All these people, the economy's great and unemployment's low and the stock market is so high. You think these people have investments in the stock market? They're just trying to be able to afford a grocery bill. They're just trying to be able to make it in terms of rent. I mean, that's really the one that's such an incredible burden. And so, of course, they don't feel like the economy is good. Of course, they don't feel like this economy was designed to work for them, because it's not. And it also really explains why you've seen such an age divergence in terms of perceptions and reality of the economy, and then that's trickling down into political choices, obviously, but it's quite something to see it laid out like this.
Yeah, well, we have some of that, actually. CBS News just put out a new poll about young people. Now, whether we agree with the actual numbers on Biden or Trump or not, they had good insight into what the outlook of this generation is. Let's take a listen.
We're going to look at all the key groups in this election, but I wanted to start with this one. What's interesting about them is they feel like they've already been tested in their lives. This is a generation, the younger part of them, who were in high school or college during COVID and the lockdowns, and most of them tell us that interrupted their education. They also look back, say they were more concerned about gun violence during those years than older generations. But what's really interesting here is they are also feeling like the older generation has left them a world that's more dangerous and a climate that's worse. And that motivates a lot of the issues that they care about. Having said that, Margaret, you can look at polling from the 60s when the baby boomers were the young generation then, from the 90s when it was Gen X. There have always been generation gaps in America. But for this generation today, they're the most racially diverse generation that the country has ever seen. And that comes out in their politics too. They tell us they feel that politics would be better, not just with more young people in it, but also with more minority voices in politics, with more women in elected office. And they feel that way much more so than the oldest generation does.
So there you go. Also, the funny thing is, as usual, media, they're like, oh, race and all that. I'm like, yeah, what about some diverse opinion? That's really what I think a lot of people are thinking as well. So as usual, people, they can see it on the surface, but then they never estimate their own culpability. But we can't put our own people off the hook. We don't vote, even close to the same numbers. Not enthused, not excited, not engaged in the political process, lack a lot of more community roots. There's a lot of reasons for that, but structurally, it just means you're not going to have as much of a voice, in the system, and thus the system chugs along for the old, for the boomers, and for the silent generation.
Yeah, I mean, they're certainly not wrong that the way the economy has been set up and the ideological project, predominantly of the boomers it's massively inflated asset prices. So what does that mean? That means that they're like, okay, my parents were able to get a home. Remember the concept of a starter home?
Yeah,
the idea that you could get a job and then you could buy it. That's dead. That doesn't exist. I don't know if I'll ever be able to buy a home is what they're thinking. They're looking at the cost continuing to go up and up and up. Mortgage rates obviously have, made it so much more expensive. You're competing now against Wall Street buyers who are coming in, or people who are already, wealthy and older who can plunk down all cash offers. You just feel like you don't stand a chance. You feel like your parents' generation had a lot more opportunities open to them than you do. And, that's really antithetical to our self-conception as a country. Like the idea of the country, the sort of the core American dream ideas, things just keep getting better. And, we, as parents too, I'll be able to pass forward something to my kids that will be even better and they'll have more opportunities than I did. Young people don't feel it that way, and they haven't felt that way for quite a while, really since the financial crash, I think, and everybody who's come after. And inflation has been such an incredible burden for this generation to be able to cope with. The wages have ticked up some, but it's not nearly enough to deal with when you look at things like health insurance, housing, et cetera.
Right.
So,
well, you referenced starter homes. I was telling you, I read that book about grand expectations about America. It was really inspirational, honestly. It was a cool country. We used to build a lot of stuff. We had these things called Levitowns. They're very famous with starter homes. So I'm looking in Levittown, New York, in the neighborhood that was supposed to be starter homes, which were very available to the average middle class. The cheapest house that I can find in Levittown is $415,000. That is a complete starter up, and it's a condo. It's a one bed, one bath. If you want a 1,400 square foot house, which is kind of redone, but still done in the 1950s, whenever it was born, $650K. So good luck, good luck paying $655,000 for a house that was built, in the 1950s, starter home, 1,400 square feet, which was considered a starter home at that time, and no garage parking. That's the country that we live in right now.
Yeah.
And that's we're not talking about Manhattan. We're talking about Levittown, which is far away. It's probably still, an hour drive or something like that. And there's a couple of other Levitowns across America. I think one in PA as well, similar in terms of their prices. There's a good write-up there about how all the old starter homes from the 1950s to the 1970s are selling for orders of magnitude more in terms of percentage of income than they did at the time. So we have a crisis, and nobody just seems to care about it. And that's why, the rent piece of this for the younger generation, I think You know, they're going to be the most like pro-housing generation ever just because they got more screwed than anybody else. But it's going to take a long time before a lot of the boomer political power fades away.
Yeah, no, that's right.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.